Hello, welcome to today's webinar, Preparing Your Organization for a Generative Future. This is the third and final session in our fall series on Gen AI, led by MIT Sloan's George Westerman and sponsored by Skillsoft. I'm Abby Lundberg, Editor-in-Chief at MIT Sloan Management Review, and I'll be moderating the event. In the first session in this series, we laid the groundwork for what generative AI is and isn't, how it relates to current and past technologies, and what it takes to make good decisions about its use. In the second session, we explored how companies prioritize use cases for investment, how they manage risk, and measure value. If you missed those, you can still watch them on demand from our website. We'll put a link to that in the chat. Today, we'll get an inside look at how Cisco, a $76 billion food services company, is incorporating AI across its business in sales, customer support, supply chain, and warehouse operations. We'll learn where they see the greatest opportunities for generative AI and how they're addressing the all-important issues of roles and other organizational implications. I'm really looking forward to hearing from both our speakers. George Westerman is a senior lecturer at the MIT Sloan School of Management, a pioneering researcher on digital transformation, and author of the landmark book, Leading Digital. Tom Peck is Executive Vice President and Chief Information and Digital Officer at Cisco, where he oversees technology, e-commerce, cybersecurity, data analytics, inbound supply chain and logistics. And Tom, that's a lot of stuff to be responsible for, and he has a mandate to accelerate Cisco's growth through modern technologies and data. Welcome, George and Tom.
Hi there. Welcome everybody who's been here, coming here for the event, and welcome Tom to share what you've been doing at Cisco, you and your team. It's a really interesting story. I'm really delighted you're willing to share it with us today.
Yeah. Good morning, George. Good morning, Abby. Thanks for having me. It's a big honor to be here and share our story. So thank you.
Fantastic. So why don't we start, Tom? Can you tell us a little bit about what Cisco is?
Sure. Cisco is a company that you've probably seen our 14,000 trucks driving around your local neighborhoods. We're what we call a food away from home business. We cater primarily to restaurants, which are about 2/3 of our customer base, healthcare facilities, sporting arenas and stadiums, airports, cruise ships, everything other than generally retail grocery. We do everything from high-end steak and seafood to fast food delivery. We have an entire assortment of nearly 2 million SKUs that we distribute. Think about different cuisine segments. When you go to dinner at your local favorite restaurant, there's a fairly good chance that you're getting food flowing through our supply chain. We also do equipment and supplies. Think about the stemware, the glassware, the cookware, the ovens, the kitchen supplies, to be a full turnkey food service business. At our core, we are a supply chain company. We are logistics. We're about getting the right product to the customer at the right time. And what's super exciting about being at Cisco at this time, George, is technology and digital and AI and generative AI. It's not just pervasive in our business, but it's really driving our transformation. And I can't think of a better place to be today.
Well, Tom, the first time, the way I got to know you and we got to know each other is through our MIT Sloan CIO Leadership Awards. And you really impressed you and your team. The story you have and the transformation you've been driving really impressed our judges. You were the winner last year, and congratulations on that. But I'm hoping, can you tell the transformation story quickly so people know what you've been doing over the last few years?
Yeah, great. And thanks again for the honor of the award. I was humbled, and it was extremely great to recognize the entire Cisco company and the Cisco technology team for what we've done. And it all centers, George, as you know, around our recipe for growth. Our CEO, Kevin Hurricane, about two and a half years ago, during the end of the pandemic economy, if you will, there was a call to action to help us transform ourselves and to grow about 1.5 times faster than the market. And that recipe for growth and that growth agenda focused on the customer was all about the 5 initiatives you can see on the right-hand side. It was all about driving a digital customer experience. It was about improved merchandising and product assortment, a more agile supply chain, improving our sales operations, And Future Horizons was about new segments, channels, and innovation in food delivery and service. And that strategy and our recipe for growth was built upon a really, really solid, strong purpose statement of our company, how we care for people, how we do responsible product sourcing, how we take care of the planet on top of a mission, vision, and identity to be the world's best food distributor. And our recipe for growth is predicated and heavily reliant on our digital tools and technologies.
Well, it's interesting. As much as you talked about your thousands of trucks around the world and the millions of SKUs, this is really an information problem, right? It's such a complex set of things that need to get from here to there, error-free and quickly. And so, what you've been able to do with information is really interesting. And of course, where there's information, where there are processes connecting with customers and operations, there's an opportunity to apply some AI also. So I wonder, could you just talk about some of the places that you're using AI in this transformation? And maybe just start by talking about what you're doing with customers.
Sure. And I like to tee it up, George, for everybody by saying this. We are taking a traditional, what I would call high-touch B2B company and turning it into a B2C like company. And that's what's setting the stage for our use of data analytics, AI, generative AI. And let me explain what I mean by B2C like. In a traditional B2B business, think about your restaurateur or your chef. Those customers of ours would traditionally reorder products from a list. Think about you when you go to a grocery store, you go to your favorite coffee shop, you traditionally probably hit, hey, I want the same thing I ordered yesterday. And it was a traditional 3-tier model where we would get product from our suppliers, we would get it to our restaurateurs, and then you, the end customer, would get it. So the movement to a B2C-like company is what you would expect as a consumer. More self-service capabilities, the ability to personalize that experience, reduce that friction, making it really easy to do business with Cisco, to empower you to make choices, your own self-selection, and to extend that reach to you via these self-service online shopping channels, our shop platform, our mobile platforms, et cetera, those types of capabilities. So what we've seen is data and the ability to personalize that experience has been driving that across multiple channels in our customer base. We're seeing upwards of 80% customer placed orders, and the data in the AI is really driving that upsell, cross-sell, true shopping experience as opposed to that more transactional reorder. And it's really driving that transformation that's reliant on that technology we're going to talk more about.
Well, great. So before we jump into what, how you're managing the AI part of this story, now that you're talking about this new B2C and other changes, let's ask the group. All of you that are out there, how are you doing on the current state of your AI and generative strategy? So we gave you 3 options here. It's really mature, it's executing well. Second, you're experimenting with some MVPs. You're helping to kind of just try to figure out what your strategy should be, or maybe you don't have one yet. Now, I know there are other options, but we're going to force you to choose one of these 3. So please just go ahead and make a choice, and we can see what the general industry, what the population, all the the many of you people here are doing, so we can get that going. Now, Tom, if I were to ask you, where would you put yourself on these 3?
Yeah, George, that's a great question. I think that we certainly have a strategy, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes, of course. It's far from mature. It's far from fully ramped up. I think very few folks actually have a mature, fully executed generative AI strategy. But we are absolutely experimenting. We're having ideation sessions around top use cases. We've got discussions with vendors. We're building an AI tech stack. And I'm really curious on what the other participants will poll here. But I think we can learn a lot from each other. And I look forward to sharing a little bit more about our strategy as well.
Okay, great. So let's see what we have here. Most people are still in the learning stage. They're and just trying to figure this thing out. And that's important. Now, the question is, are you learning or are you waiting? Hopefully you've at least dipped your toe in the water here, even if you haven't actually started to do some serious experiments or other things. About a third of the group is where you are, Tom. You said you're somewhere between middle and rising on your set. It's about a third of their group here. So I think that, what you're doing with the experiment, it could be really helpful for the other people that are working through it. So does this kind of match what you're hearing with your peers in the market, Tom?
Yeah, it does, George. I'm not surprised at all. Like you said, it's consistent with where I feel we are as a company. My personal opinion is I think a lot of my peers, a lot of technology executives, to include a lot of our tech partners across the ecosystem, there's a lot of confusion around traditional AI versus generative AI. And a lot of companies, to include Cisco, we've been doing traditional AI and machine learning for quite some time. And the generative AI is what's new. And I think that's where you're seeing a lot of the listen, watch, learn, less mature strategies. So, you've got to decide if you want to be a fast follower, an early adopter. And you and I will talk through a couple of those thoughts and a couple of the challenges we're seeing here shortly.
Great. Well, I think that sets up perfectly what the next slide is in the story. Sam, can we have the slides back? Perfect. Okay, great. So, just to follow on what you just said there, can we talk about what you're doing in sales and customer support?
Yeah, we have two pages here to talk about sales and supply chain because at our core that's what we do. We sell product and we ship product. And let me walk you in the audience through a couple of examples here. We have a fairly substantial sales force. We have customer call centers, traditional customer support that most companies would have. And if I can quickly just walk through a couple of the examples. We talked earlier about moving from reorder from list to a more shopping, frictionless self-service shopping experience. And one of the big things that we're very, very excited about is forgotten and suggested orders. We talked about the nearly 2 million SKUs that we sell, but there's really about 200,000 of them that really matter. The more common purchased ones, Cisco branded items, more profitable items, or those more desired by our customers. We've been doing traditional data science and artificial intelligence, traditional style, if this, then that logic. You might like these French fries also, or you might like these types of products. But what we're super excited about is the additional signals that we can get from a larger data pool, larger language model, inclusive of unstructured data, that will help us be even more creative on feeding that market basket and that shopping cart for our customers. And we're starting to see some experimentation going on. We're seeing higher lines per order. We're seeing bigger shopping carts and higher margins because of taking traditional AI and turning it into more generative when it becomes that shopping experience. The other thing, George, I want to touch on is the call center optimization. I won't give you the explicit statistics, but the quantity of calls we get per day times the minutes per call, obviously that takes dollars in customer support, and it's also an inconvenience to our customers. So how do we take the call out in the first place? But if we can't do that, you need to call us. Let's make sure it's a great experience. So how do we look at the call volume, Pareto chart style, automate that self-service? How do we build bots and things like that? But that's the more traditional view of the world. How do we leverage the generative capabilities of natural language processing to do translation, take in more of those signals that I spoke about earlier, to do more sentiment analysis, to help build the scripts for our call centers, and also to do training post conversation and build an even smarter, more proactive call center. We're also doing call planning and menu curation call planning each week. Our sales consultants spend literally hours manually and with a little bit of help from technology planning their call lists and their leads and opportunities. How do we further automate that and drive next best actions for our sales teams? And for our chefs and our customers, think about menu curation. Think about how you're shopping, where we can take images, whether it's some shrimp and linguine, and how we turn that into a carefully curated visual that's aesthetically appealing. That can be a shrimp linguine dish sitting on your menu for your customers, or how we can take coconut flakes and turn that into a Asian cuisine element within a Thai restaurant. So we're excited about some of the opportunity there. And the final thing is customer segmentation. Even though that's not necessarily a generative AI capability, the data that we have that segments our customer from most profitable or the ones who do the most business with us to the less profitable or least amount of business with us. That's what drives a lot of the data that feeds some of the things that we spoke about earlier. So we think this is a great way to improve the customer experience. It's a great way to make our teams more effective and at the end of the day, get the right product and delight the customer.
And it's interesting that these customer-facing things, of course, are the more visible elements, and so we hear more about them in the media because they are more visible. But you're doing so much else behind the scenes too, and you have a slide here to talk about some of that.
Yes. So, supply chain, if we sell the product, we've got to get it there. Of course, it's all about, delivery windows. It's all about making sure that we get the fill rates from our suppliers and we get the product to the customer on time. And if you think about a traditional warehouse for any industry, not just food, it's about inbound logistics and supply chain, getting the right product into the warehouse, which, as Abby said, I now have responsibility for, George, which is interesting because if you think about a traditional CIO or CIDO running inbound logistics, it's all about the data. It's all about the algorithms. It's all about the forecasting, the AI, the generative AI to do inventory management. So getting the right product in, it's about getting the right pick routes and the right pick lanes in the warehouse, getting the right product on the right truck, and then getting it to the customer. So when you look at the list here, the ability to shop on any channel and to deliver anyway, this omni-channel experience is driven heavily by data science and AI. But what I'm even more excited about is this concept of what we call intelligent substitutions. As our suppliers sometimes struggle with getting us product, whether it's climate or production issues or shortages of stock, how can we, using, again, the science and the math, generate substitutions that can improve those fill rates and get our customers not only an equivalent product, perhaps something even better than what they're used to. So driving better substitutions. And if you think about our trucks, our smart routing, the onboard telematics, and how we manage our fleet, we talked about the 14,000 trucks. It's funny, George, when I started working for Cisco, people started sending me pictures of trucks. You see our trucks everywhere. And it makes my day when I walk up to one of our delivery colleagues and chat. But our warehouses have upwards of 7 to 9 temperature zones that we need to pick from. Our trucks have 3 temperature zones and typically do about 10 or 12 or 14 delivery stops per day. How you route that truck is fairly, common today, but how you get more signals around weather, traffic, and do more dynamic routing, and how you load that truck is super important. Shipping air, as we like to say, doesn't make us any money. How do you get optimal pick through the warehouse? How do you get optimal load on that truck? And ultimately, it's about running a smarter warehouse. And maybe if we go to the next slide, I can give you a couple more examples of what we're doing in supply chain. And if you think about any supply chain, not just a food warehouse, but we're all doing some degree of experimentation with robotics and goods to people picking, AR and VR, assisted picking, anything that we can do to improve the pick route and pick speed in the warehouse reduces what we call our cost per piece and drives our cost down. It loads the trucks faster. But what's new here is the more signals. Again, I keep talking about these signals. It's all about the data, the unstructured data, the data that maybe sat outside of a traditional structured database that can feed a more predictive and more prescriptive way to route so that we're getting more pieces picked per pallet, more trucks loaded faster. So the predictive, prescriptive experience in generating a better way to route and load trucks is big upside for us. And one of the cooler things that we do at Cisco is on the right-hand side of the page, food processing. It's a lot of high-end material handling equipment in the processing piece. There's a couple pictures there where you could say it's more traditional AI. You can see machines that we have that are cutting perfectly symmetrical, consistent 8-ounce fillets of steak, or are looking at 80 different types of tomatoes looking at color and firmness and how round they are, and at the end of the conveyor belt, the science and the algorithms and the AI is actually deciding which bin to put it in, and using that customer segmentation we spoke about earlier. So I'm pretty excited, George, not just about sales, but what's going on in the warehouse, what's going on in food processing, and how it's helping our drivers get the trucks where they need to go.
And Tom, it's interesting. You're sounding a little bit like a data scientist or like an AI person. I keep hearing you say the new signals that are available here. And you haven't said the word, but I think it's all over the place, right? That you're just constantly experimenting to get those algorithms right. So can you say just a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's some people out there who debate whether you need to have perfectly clean, data before you embark upon AI or generative AI. There's some people who might argue that you need to have a perfectly planned and articulated and sourced technology stack before you embark upon AI. I don't believe that, George. I think we don't know enough yet. I think that you've got to real time learn. You've got to experiment. We had an internal meeting with some of our AI talent in data science folks yesterday within Cisco, and we've got a lot of people experimenting right now. We're learning, we're adapting. That's how you get smart. That's how you tune the models. That's how you get comfortable. Experimenting allows you to learn and fail fast. And what we just need to be careful about, stating the obvious, is every time you're experimenting, you're distracting or diluting your focus on something else that you could be working on. And that's a big part of my job, is making sure that we're smartly experimenting and prioritizing our time and talent appropriately.
Fantastic. Great. Well, hey, let's go ahead and talk. I know you're going to talk in a minute about how you're managing AI and generative AI in the company, but let's ask the group here. How are you, everybody out there, how are you managing Gen AI? Are you doing it separately from other forms of AI, or are you doing it together with the other AI that you're looking at? So just a quick yes, no answer on these ones. And, it's interesting. Gen AI is just such a different kind of animal, right? So there's the AI that we had before, the experimentation, the algorithm development, the constant improvement in the operation. You said that. Gen AI goes on that extra bit that you're actually creating and you're summarizing, or you're doing those kinds of things. Are you seeing a lot of excitement in your company, Tom? Or are you seeing more reticence? How are they thinking about this?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of excitement. Part of my job as a technology executive is to temper that excitement and enthusiasm with practical reality of what's real and what's not real, and what can we do today or what can't we do today. And again, we'll talk a little bit about a couple examples here shortly, but there's absolute excitement and passion around AI and Gen AI. And I don't want to tip the poll. Well, here's the poll results. In managing separately, it's interesting. This actually surprises me a little bit, George, because I would have expected more people to say that they're not managing separately. And here's why I say that. If you ask me, is your company managing Gen AI separately from other forms, I would say no, we're not managing separately. So I would expect it bigger than 60%. And here's why I say that. There's still a lot of confusion out there on the difference between AI and Gen AI. And if you think about traditional AI, it learns from a more structured data set. It's typically programmed to look for patterns, but it does generate and produce output. It may generate insights. It may generate conclusions. It may make a predictive or a prescriptive type of a recommendation. But the generative AI is different, because it can ingest and produce human-like multimodal output, whether it's voice or content or images. But it's a fine line in many cases, and I tend to look at both as part of a broader strategy.
It's interesting, Tom. I expected also the same thing, that far more people would say no. And if I had to guess what's happening, some of people are deliberately making it different. But I wonder whether some of the yeses here are people that aren't actually doing much yet with traditional AI. And Gen AI was a cue or a spur to start doing AI stuff straight off. Yeah. If you have, if you want to put some things in the chat on that, on how you're thinking about that when you're managing it separately, maybe we can come back to those chats. So Tom, let's go ahead now. And you said you're doing this as kind of an integrated strategy. So if you can you talk a little bit more about your strategy?
Sure. When I first started, the whole generative AI buzz has been around for many, many, many months now. And when we first started thinking about this, maybe with a little more urgency, 6+ months ago, I was under a lot of pressure to build a generative AI strategy. And I quickly learned, and George, I'm currently in the camp that I don't need a generative AI strategy. What I need is an automation strategy. Now, I don't know who would agree or disagree with my thoughts there, but let me walk you through it very quickly. When you think about an automation strategy, the concept of workflow or robotic process automation or bots in more traditional AI and machine learning that we just spoke about, it's evolving over time into the generative AI and the large language models that we're talking about more today. But if you think about it, a lot of our business use cases, a lot of the things we talked about earlier, and a whole bunch of things we didn't talk about earlier, can be solved with more basic or traditional automation capabilities. So what we're doing here is similar to what I call our why not cloud strategy. It's kind of like a why not RPA or why not bot or why not traditional AI. And then if they don't solve that problem, then we'll go into more of a build your own generative AI solution. Let me walk you through, how to read this chart. But as the use cases, the ideas come in our case, we recently ideated around about 250 quote unquote new ideas. We pump them into our model, and can our existing bots, which are becoming smarter with more native AI, and or our existing robotic process automation, solve the problem? If so, great, let's do that. Least cost automation, solve the business problem, or leverage the incumbent capabilities of the SaaS tools we have today because we already own them. Why would we not leverage what we have today within our incumbent SaaS tools? Then whatever's left, and then you go into a more traditional business case model where you decide, what are you going to do? How are you going to build it? What is your AI tech stack? And what do you do going forward? And that's what, honestly, George, that's where we start to get into the challenges that most of us face today. Everything up to that point is fairly straightforward. We've been doing that for years. But okay, now what? How do we build or how do we buy our generative AI capabilities beyond this strategy?
Well, let's ask everybody, right? On this, we're going to get into some of how you're doing this, but let's ask the group, how are you? Who's leading this? Where's this Gen AI strategy coming from? Tom talked a little bit about his, and then we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that. So please let us know what's happening with you. Tom, I was just going through some of the comments while you were talking about this question about why did they say it's not with AI, with the AI strategy. And, we're getting a variety of things. So some people said, yeah, absolutely. We just haven't done AI yet. And so this is the start of it. Mm-hmm. Some people said why they have it in a more integrated way. One person, though, said the reason they've split it out separately is because the risk is so strong. Mm. They want to give it some really extra attention because of that while they figure out how to manage those risks. And then there's some other thoughts in here also. So thanks, everybody, for contributing your thoughts on why in or why out on that situation. So, Sam, how are we looking on the survey? All right. We have a whole mix here. Still figuring this out is the winner here. That's great. That's great. Figuring out it is a big thing. That would suggest to me that you're also still trying to figure out what is AI in your organization. You're just starting with the experiments, which is good. The majority here, though, is in somehow IT leading this, right? 43%. And that makes sense. This is such a data-oriented thing. For me, it's also a happy thing because I got started studying CIOs. And, we still have run the CIO Leadership Award. Tom, you are a CIO and Chief Digital Officer, but you started as a CIO. So the fact that IT is trusted to run this, I think, is a real statement. And frankly, it's a little different from, say, earlier in the digital transformation stage, where IT might have been having a piece of it, but not leading. But Tom, what do you think seeing this? Any reactions to that?
Yeah, two quick reactions. First, for those who said still figuring it out, I'm not surprised. I would have expected about that size of an answer. And what I would say to those of you who selected that, this is also an opportunity for you to step up and show leadership and initiative and help take a much more influential role. What I found throughout my career is where there's lack of an explicit leader, sometimes implicit leadership you can step into and help influence that. So I would encourage those of you who have a passion or knowledge or an interest or relevant use cases, if you're still figuring it out, here's a great opportunity to step up. George, the second thing I would say, the central IT unit, the 29%. Yeah, I think that's certainly what's happening here at Cisco. But I would caveat that by saying a couple things. In the old days, CIOs were very much focused on the delivery of technology. Today, good CIOs or chief information digital officers need to be much more business savvy, driving transformations, process improvement, e-commerce data, et cetera, et cetera. So when we say central IT, kind of the implication that I wanted to explicitly call out is that we're putting on our business hat. And even though we're technologists, we need to be business savvy, and we need to broker those relationships and incubate those ideation sessions with the business. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the technology, it's about solving the business problem. So if central IT is running it, where you have a chief AI officer, I would suggest that a good CIO or a good CIDO absolutely can and should help coordinate and facilitate this. So this is, I think, a good answer.
Fantastic. Hey, can you respond to a comment that lots of people are putting more comments in? I just want to put in it's kind of a broad comment, and I just want to hear what you have to say about it. One person wrote in, leadership needs to drive this. What's your response to that statement?
That's a great comment, and a couple quick thoughts. We all know leadership's different than management. Management is doing, but on budgets, on time. Leadership is more about inspiring and motivating and getting people to do things they might not otherwise be capable of or doing. So leadership, that inspirational, visionary, absolutely. The question is, where does that leadership come from? Within Cisco, we have an absolutely very top-down CEO staff down, vision, support, mandate to do all this. That leadership, that time and attention is super important. So totally agree with that. I also agree that somebody needs to be above and beyond, in this case, me, to kind of coordinate and facilitate that. And then I would also remember everybody, whether you're an individual contributor or a subject matter expert in the organization, can exhibit leadership, help ideate or solve problems and bringing things up through management leadership ranks and bringing good ideas and good use cases. So leadership doesn't always have to be at the top, but it certainly starts at the top.
Okay, great. Thanks. Let's jump back to the slides then. Let's talk about how you're thinking through this a little bit more. This is really fascinating the way you've been thinking about this problem.
Yeah. If you think about, our strategy, again, just to bridge back, leverage native AI within SaaS tools, RPA, bots, et cetera. Then you get into well, I've exhausted all my my capabilities. So we've kind of built a framework on how to look at this. And this is one of my two top challenges that I wanted to talk about. So it really comes down to build versus buy. And I used to say, George, can somebody show me where to buy a SKU of AI? You can't find a SKU of AI. And now, AI has become native or embedded and data science, so that question is kind of going away. The new question is, how do I decide whether to buy or build AI or generative AI? And let me tell you what I mean by that. So in our overly simplistic view of the world, I have a illustrative AI stack off to the left here. Now, if you talk to any of the technology or cloud providers, they have their own version of this, but quite simply, if you look at it from top to bottom, a more user-centric companion, think co-pilots and things like that, digital virtual assistants, moving down functional models. Then you got more AI builders, think of like platform as a service capabilities, and they all sit on cloud in heavy GPU-centric environments. So if you think about that, the stack gets a little confusing. Which vendor do you choose? Is it open source? Is it one of the cloud providers? So, at the risk of way oversimplifying, George, to reinforce our strategy, what we found is we prefer to buy. And what I mean by that is we will buy RPA bots and SaaS tools before we build new large language models, because I'd rather have that built natively into our capabilities. And if you think about the benefits of a buy solution or an RPA type solution or a native AI, not only are they purpose built, they're more secure, they're better integrated, has some low code, no code configurations and capabilities. But we've also found out within Cisco, 92% of the use cases for AI or generative AI can be solved by tools that already exist. 92%. But we only own less than half of that. Okay. So we've got to figure out, okay, do we buy the other half? Do we build the other 8%? So it's not as simple as I make it sound, but let us buy and leverage what we already have. And then if you have to, then we will go to one of the technology providers. And if you build it on your own, you can differentiate, maybe have a bigger impact on your market. But there's too many choices out there. To be honest, it's confusing. What's generally available? How do you pay for it? Is paid by transactions? Is it subscription? But the companies that do this for a living are getting easier to work with on Lego style block building on top of foundational models with APIs. So having the right architecture talent in your team to help navigate through this build versus buy is helping us with this framework. And ultimately, what we're working on, George, is and why I said we're not fully mature yet, is we're still building our AI stack. We're still building our decision tree, and we're still saying, if you want to solve this type of use case, then pick this tool. If other use case, then pick a different tool. But happy to share more about our build versus buy framework another day if there's anybody that is of interest. But I know for a fact that many of my peers are struggling with the same situation. But if anybody hasn't figured out, by the way, give me a call, drop me a note. I'd love to learn as well.
That's good. I'd say this is so smart, right? These are expensive. They're difficult. There's a lot of experimentation going on. You got to hire talent that's really hard to find. And, you don't build your own operating systems. You buy an operating system. You don't build your own ERP systems. You buy them. In many ways, the foundation models become the foundation for the models that you build internally, but you don't need to build a whole stack. And so it's the way you're thinking about it is interesting. This also was very interesting from the people side of things. So, I'm spending a lot of time on workforce these days. So I love that you're thinking through these roles.
Yeah. This is the second big challenge, we have. Getting the ideas of what to do is not that hard. The build versus buy is difficult, but this is arguably even more difficult. And I like to tell this story in two ways. First of all, there's plenty of studies out there we've all read about how AI and generative AI is going to drive productivity, GDP growth, et cetera. We can quantify that. There's equally a number of articles and publications talking about jobs being replaced. And George, even one of your recent MIT studies said, and I quote, 60% of today's jobs are in fields that did not exist in 1940, end quote. So what you're seeing is technology is driving a transformation of the job market. And we at Cisco view AI and generative AI not as people replacements, but as people productivity enhancers or digital or virtual assistants. So we've got to make sure that the organization embraces it, doesn't fear it, and knows how to use it. But the other part of the challenge here is the roles within my team. And when you're running a technology, digital, and data team, I have a overly simplistic Venn diagram here. And one of the things is everybody now wants to be involved in AI and generative AI, because if you're not, then you're not cool, or you're not progressive, or you're not working on modern things. And I would argue that that's not true. There's lots of other really cool things going on, but managing the different roles and responsibilities and what it means, and to just call it a couple of key points here, these skills and these types of roles are not going to be replaced by AI and generative AI. Yeah, they'll be supplemented by code generation and things like that. But we still need data scientists. We still need data engineers, and we still need other engineers. AI and ML will make data scientists even better. It'll make it faster for them to draw their results. Data engineers become even more important as we get more unstructured and larger language models and how they work together. And the data engineers and the other engineers will create more usable products that can be consumed by business. But the key point I would make here is the footnote is super important. So other engineers, software engineers, AI engineers, prompt engineers, things like that. There's a role and a job here for everybody. Personally, at Cisco, we're not going to create a quote unquote AI team. What we are going to do is build that AI framework that we spoke about and make sure that we have the right AI and generative AI tools in your tool belt so that regardless of your role, you know where to play, how to play, and which tool to use at the right time. And if you think about the convergence of all these roles, at the end of the day, it's all about data as a product that can be consumed, monetized, and differentiate yourself in the business. So we're navigating through this. We don't have it all figured out, but we want everybody to understand that every person in the whole organization can contribute and learn at the same time.
Fantastic. So Tom, you have one more slide with your top 3 recommendations, but why don't we hold that towards the end? Because I think this is a great time to do some questions, and we can do your top 3 recommendations. Let's kind of wrap up on the session. So at this point, Abby, do you want to take over and take some questions from the group?
Absolutely. And, I always know when a talk is good when you and your presentation have already answered some of the questions that were coming in. So great job there. And I want to follow up on one of the, on your last slide about the job roles. Ramu is asking, what is Cisco's strategy for redesigning traditional job roles so that employees can use Gen AI as a co-pilot to make their jobs more meaningful? So not just the roles around AI, but the traditional roles that are being affected by having these supports.
Yeah, it's a great question. I didn't talk much about that, but whether you're working in our legal department or our bid department, we do a lot of bids, contract management. A lot of those types of jobs are obviously heavily impacted and or even threatened by generative AI. If you think about our finance organization, where analysis and building financial statements, absolutely much more impacted. So our approach is, as I said earlier, as I hinted at earlier, we view these tools, whether it's Copilot, and use that term Copilot more generically, not to endorse a particular product, but we view them as digital assistants to help you. I've seen some really cool things that can extract information out of material to build bids faster, or analyze bids faster, or draw conclusions from Zoom calls or Teams calls, and how do we extract that information, make it more valuable? So we are experimenting in that area. We don't want it to be a threat. These are not job replacements. We think it's the ability to get more volume and velocity through the existing people with higher quality. My challenge to the market out there is you got to make it easier for us to buy and consume this stuff. It's still too expensive in my opinion, and it's hard to, as my CFO likes to say, you can't take productivity to the bank. We have to figure out how to take productivity, quantify it, get more volume or velocity, or take on new acquisitions or more customers at the same price. But there's a lot in there, Abby, and I'd love to talk more, but there's probably some other questions.
Yeah, well, so I'm going to come back to that question of how do you measure that, how do you take it to the bank? But you started your talk talking about experimentation and wanting to encourage that learning, real-time learning through experimentation. And so Kelly asks, given your strong emphasis on experimentation, what are you doing to create or maintain a culture where risk-taking and fast failure is encouraged, while, as you said at the beginning, also balancing against, not distracting from the rest of the important work that needs to be done?
Yeah, that's a great question. We had I said a little while ago, we had a meeting internal at Cisco yesterday, and one of my cloud leaders said he was getting inundated with some experimentation requests. So we need to be careful because people start spinning up unauthorized large language models generating cost. We got to put guardrails in place, and we have those. But you don't want to squash the experimentation. So we have a pretty good inventory of what we own, what's low cost. I've told my team, and I have the luxury of leading a Fortune 50 size technology and digital team. So I have scale where I can encourage my people to be hobbyists or experiment and give them the opportunity via hackathons or a little bit of time in their week to come up with ideas. And one of the things that I've been asked is, hey, Tom, can I have more people and more money to do more AI? And I said, no. What you need to do is think about how we build and buy and deliver our software differently. And I think that's usually important. And if you're writing software in more traditional fashion, how do we encourage people to experiment, fast fail, write their code, deliver their products in a safer manner? I've also told my team, Abby, that I can pay third-party consultants to come in here and help us figure out what we need to do. And there's probably some value in that. Or given the size and scale and the talent that many of us have, encourage our people to experiment. And I'm telling you, that's priceless. They love it. It makes them feel like they're involved and engaged, and it's going extremely well. Now I've got to manage and throttle that experimentation probably a little bit.
Great. So then circling back to that question of, measurement and making sure you're getting the value that you're hoping to get, Larry asks, regarding experiments, can you speak about the process for creating improvement KPIs against existing performance baselines? Do you have improvement thresholds you set as KPI validators?
Yeah. It's usually important whenever you're experimenting or doing anything. I always say, how are you going to measure success? What does good look like? And you kind of agree with that up front. And what we like to do is don't get too precise early as you're experimenting. You don't need decimal quick precision on KPIs or business cases. We're kind of learning and refining. But when you think about sales or supply chain for us, I gave a couple of KPIs. How do we get more picks on a pallet? How do we get a pick route in a warehouse down to fewer minutes? How do we get less air on a truck? How do we take a sales consultant that can actually handle N number of customers per week? And now, because of AI and generative AI, can do N plus. So we do measure this. We do hold ourselves accountable. And one of the things that we're pretty good at is what I call test and scale. Which also allows us to abort or cancel or fail fast. But are we achieving those KPIs before we throttle it, up full speed ahead? So absolutely. And the advice I would give everybody on that is, again, these are not technology-driven KPIs. The business needs to own this. Our job is to co-own this and help facilitate that discussion and help them understand the art of the possible.
So you talked about how you're engaging your team in experimentation, and in your last slide, I guess, you had that model of the different AI roles. Jill is asking, how are you finding the right AI talent, or are you training up your current team? So, thinking about those different roles, does that answer vary depending on the different roles?
Yeah, and that kind of ties in with the organization talent challenge that I have. It's similar to the build versus buy on the tech stack. It's a build versus buy on talent. We work with a third party company to help us build our job specs and do our learning, and we're adopting our jobs and skills profile to always be up to date with the modern technology. And I would say the following: we have some great world-class data scientists in our team that are already building robust models and machine learning that taking the next leap to work with architects on large language models and things like that is not a huge leap. So we're training up and teaching. The other thing I would say is don't underestimate the talent you already have in your teams today. I was shocked, actually, and I say this in a positive manner, but I was shocked that about 10% of my workforce, and I might be privileged to have a larger workforce than many companies, but about 10% of my team already had some degree of self-attested proficiency in AI, machine learning, and generative AI. And even if you say half of them are overstated, then that's still a pretty good inventory of capabilities. And Abby, I would much rather take an internal employee who's engaged and talented, who has a passion, and invest in them and teach them and take them from being a hobbyist to being more of an AI programmer, AI architect, or AI developer. So we're investing and we'll continue to invest heavily on our incumbent talent, but of course, we will change our job specs, and we're always looking to bring the right talent in as needed as well. And related to that, work with your partners, your ecosystem, your vendors, and have them help you. We don't have all the answers. There's lots of smart people in this world.
Yeah, and that changing job specs thing is just, it's so huge right now. And George, I'm curious to know what you're seeing in terms of, outside of Cisco and other organizations that you're working with, in terms of this talent question and build versus buy your own talent, and how people are approaching that.
So, one of the things we know is that colleges, community colleges, will not be able to fill the skills gaps that many people are experiencing right now because of retirements of the last generation and because of some specialized skills that are needed. So one of the big things is what Tom's doing, right? How can we help our existing staff do better through some targeted learning or some targeted experimentation? And how can we also find some incumbent workers elsewhere who might feel that it's better, the kind of job we can offer is better than what they're doing now? And so that's the first thing that we're hearing, is trying to repurpose is the wrong thing, because we got people, right? But try to help people move from what they're doing into something better that we need. The second is also aligned with what Tom's saying, right? Especially in the generative AI space. If you give people some good guide rails and how to stay out of trouble, and you just encourage them to experiment, some great talent is just going to make itself known by the people trying these things out, because they have passion behind it. They've got some great ideas, and to use that as, it's not a training, it's self-training, but it's a great way to identify talent.
Yeah, what I'm feeling echoes with generative AI going back to when the iPhone came out, and there was sort of that whole democratization or consumerization of IT, and people doing their own thing. So Gear asks, in broadcasting, AI is sneaking in through the back door in a lot of products that they already use, but then also at the same time, people are doing their own thing with generative AI. So is there a strategy control component, or is it more of a enticement and engagement to really try to have this be to the organization's benefit while mitigating the risks?
Tom, I think that's for you.
Yeah. Next question. No, I'm just kidding. That's a hard question. And if I had more time or more PowerPoint pages, that probably would have made my third challenge, right? The governance, the balancing risk, and that's tough. I know some companies are literally just shutting down the ability to use third-party large language models, or dropping data into ChatGPT or whatever it is. And other companies, it's an open conduit, and we've kind of got a little bit of a balance. And without saying too much, I would say we've got certain policies. We don't have an AI policy per se, but our AI policy references an existing set of policies, whether it's code of conduct, insider training, disclosure policies, cybersecurity policies. So we reference that and remind people to be smart. Okay. Then when you layer on top of that some of our cyber tools and data loss protection tools to govern and watch and alert and block things that might not look normal, or dropping large amounts of data and blocking them, so we leverage some of those capabilities. And we have data governance structure in place about what kind of data we retain, purge, access rights, all those normal things, right? But most importantly, our experimentation is fairly self-contained in models, environments, single-tenant environments, and cloud providers, where we already have trusted data, trusted conduits, encrypted transmissions, et cetera, et cetera. So you gotta have those guardrails in place. If you have those guardrails in place, you basically create a virtual sandbox where people can experiment, and that encourages more experimentation. And then you can start deciding where you want to open up things, bigger ideas.
So we have time for one or two more short questions. Going back toward the beginning of your presentation, Tom, Lawrence was curious to know if you could walk us through a customer segmentation example using generative AI, and talking about where some of the points of, what are you learning? What are some of the successes that you're experiencing there?
Yes. So, most companies segment their customers. All customers are important, obviously. Disclaimer there. But some are more important, right? Some spend more money, some do more shopping, some are more profitable. So we segment our customers, on a scale from most important to lesser important. The traditional AI, where allows us to calculate those segments or that importance, we've been doing for quite some time. But the generative AI, where a high important or highly segmented, highly ranked customer would allow us to take, again, those signals where we know that you're getting 4 shipments per week. We know that on Tuesdays versus Thursdays, you get different types of orders. But now we know that there's a holiday and or there's a sporting event in town and or a rodeo in town and or the weather's changing and or you get the idea. There's more signals that can reprioritize not necessarily your segmentation score, but how we route the truck or how we pick in a warehouse or how we anticipate what you might need. And it may change your personalized experience on our shopping platforms as well. So it just opens up a whole nother area of opportunity to get that better customer experience.
Fantastic. I have to say, I loved your quote about you don't want to ship air. that's such a great.
Yeah. Don't want to ship air, and you can't take productivity in the bank. Those are, well, quote our CFO on this section.
Okay. All right, George, I'm going to turn it back to you and Tom for Tom's final learned lessons, and then we'll wrap things up.
Fantastic. Then can we jump back to the slides for that final slide? Okay, Tom, it's all yours. Your top 3 recommendations.
Yeah. Hey, it's been great spending time with you, George, and Abby, and everybody here. And hey, I don't have it all figured out. I'm still learning, like most of you. But I mean, you heard these 3 themes throughout our discussion the last hour. It's not about the technology. We're here to solve business problems first. And by the way, generative AI may or may not be first on the priorities list. And sometimes a more basic automation strategy might solve the problems. But have your business owners work very closely with you. Number 2, lots of conversation about experimentation. Don't feel overly obligated to build a explicit vertical technology stack around AI and generative AI. Match the tools to the use cases. Put the guardrails in place that encourages that experimentation for the question. And then, arguably most important, you heard my thoughts on organization implications. People sometimes fear AI and generative AI. Sometimes you got to manage their expectations on what the capabilities of them are. But understanding where people play, how they play, what does it mean to a software engineer, a prompt engineer, a data scientist? How do you encourage people to learn and participate? You can't underestimate the organization and talent component of leading a AI and generative AI strategy. But George, that's all I got. I mean, I told you everything I know.
Well, Tom, I wish we had another hour because I know you got a lot more to say. I want to reemphasize that final point you made, right? That when we think about digital transformation, we focus on the digital a lot, but the transformation is really where we're going. And so the organization, the skill elements, the capability elements it's really important. And Tom, you've reemphasized on that, on how you're making this all happen as part of your overall transformation that you and your team have been driving at Cisco. So thank you again for sharing your insights, and hope everybody felt that this was a good hour. Thanks everybody also for sharing your comments in the comment section. We learned a lot from that too. Back to Abby.
Thank you so much, Tom and George, for this excellent and real world pragmatic talk, because there's so much hype out there that it's really great to see how this is happening in a real organization. So this concludes our series on generative AI in business. Remember, you can access the full series on our website. A special thanks to our sponsor, Skillsoft, for making the series possible. Have a fantastic rest of your day.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.